Ethan had always been a humble man, working as a retail assistant in a small neighborhood store. His life followed a predictable routine, waking up at the crack of dawn, working long hours, and returning home just to repeat the cycle. The monotony of his life didn't bother him. He was content with his small world. He had always been the kind of person who didn't seek attention or recognition. But everything changed on one rainy afternoon. It was a Tuesday, and the drizzle had turned into a heavy downpour. Ethan was finishing his shift, preparing to head home. As he stepped outside, he noticed a man in a business suit struggling to maintain his balance on the slippery parking lot. Ethan watched for a moment, but before he could even think, the man lost his footing and fell, injuring his leg. Ethan immediately rushed to the scene, heart racing. He helped the man to his feet and saw that he had twisted his ankle. His face winced in pain, but Ethan could tell he was trying to remain composed. The man introduced himself as Richard Klein, a successful entrepreneur. "I'm fine," Richard muttered, clearly embarrassed by the incident. But Ethan wasn't buying it. He knew Richard was in pain, and he couldn't just let him walk away. "Let's get you inside, at least to sit down," Ethan suggested. He supported Richard's weight as they made their way into the store, where they both took refuge from the storm. Ethan asked Richard if he needed medical assistance, but Richard waved him off, insisting he'd be fine. Richard was well-dressed, and his air of confidence gave Ethan the impression that he was someone of importance. They talked for a while, with Richard revealing that he owned a number of businesses in the city. Ethan didn't know much about business, but he was intrigued by Richard's stories. It seemed like Richard had done it all, started from scratch, built successful companies, and even been featured in magazines. He was a man of experience, someone who had lived a life most people only dreamt of. As they chatted, Ethan learned that Richard valued authenticity above all else. "I like people who are real," Richard said. "You're not just trying to impress me, are you?" Ethan chuckled, slightly embarrassed. "Not at all. I'm just trying to help." Richard smiled warmly, obviously appreciating Ethan's down-to-earth demeanor. By the time Richard felt ready to leave, the rain had subsided. Ethan helped him back to his car, where Richard again thanked him for his kindness. Before driving off, Richard handed Ethan a business card. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call. I'm always looking for good people." Ethan smiled, accepting the card, not thinking much of it. After all, how often do you meet successful business people? And what were the odds that Richard Klein would ever need someone like him? Yet, Ethan's life was about to take a turn he couldn't have imagined. The next morning, Ethan's world was turned upside down. He arrived at work expecting the same quiet day at the store. But as soon as he stepped inside, his boss, a stern man named Mr. Jenkins, was waiting for him with an expression that spelled trouble. "Ethan," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice cold, "I need to talk to you about yesterday. We've received a complaint." Ethan's heart sank. He tried to think back to anything that might have caused an issue. Had he done something wrong? Was it about the customer he had helped? "I received a report that you left the store unattended," Mr. Jenkins continued. "You helped that man outside, and in doing so, you abandoned your post. We can't have that, Ethan. You know the rules." Ethan was taken aback. "But he was hurt. I couldn't just leave him there," he tried to explain. "I understand, but rules are rules," Mr. Jenkins said, cutting him off. "I've already made the decision. You're fired." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Fired? Over helping someone? It felt like an unfair decision. He had been loyal to the store, never late, always reliable. But now all of that counted for nothing. As he packed his belongings and left the store, Ethan couldn't believe what was happening. Helping someone had cost him his job. The following hours were filled with frustration and disbelief. Ethan walked around the city, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. His mind was racing, trying to process what had happened. It wasn't just about losing his job, it was the fact that he had done the right thing and was being punished for it. He felt a sense of injustice, a bitter reminder that sometimes doing the right thing didn't always yield the right outcome. As the day wore on, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Richard Klein and the business card he had given him. Was it just a polite gesture, or did it mean something more? Ethan felt conflicted, but he finally decided to call the number on the card. What did he have to lose? He hesitated for a moment before dialing. To his surprise, Richard answered almost immediately. "Ethan, how are you?" Richard's voice was warm and inviting. I'm not doing too well, actually. I lost my job today," Ethan admitted. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry to hear that. Listen, if you're free tomorrow, I'd like to talk. I think there might be something I can offer you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. An offer? What kind of offer? Richard gave him an address and instructed him to meet him the next morning. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing was certain. He had nothing left to lose. The next morning, Ethan found himself standing in front of a large glass-covered building in the heart of the city. The address Richard had given him was the headquarters of a massive corporation, Jets Enterprises. It was nothing like Ethan had ever seen before. The building towered above the streets, sleek and modern, with the company's name displayed in bold letters at the entrance. When Ethan stepped inside, he was greeted by a receptionist who led him through a series of corridors to the executive floor. The interior was immaculate. Polished floors, glass walls, and contemporary artwork displayed on every wall. Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place. This was a world so different from his humble retail job. Richard Klein was waiting for him in a large office at the end of the hall. He stood up as Ethan entered, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Ethan, I'm glad you came. Please take a seat." As Ethan sat down, Richard wasted no time getting to the point. "I've been thinking a lot about you. What you did yesterday. It's rare to see someone willing to go out of their way for a stranger. I've got a proposition for you." Ethan listened intently, his curiosity piqued. "I run a company, Jets Enterprises, and we're always looking for people who are driven and genuine, people who can think outside the box and handle challenges with integrity. What I saw in you was more than just kindness. It was potential." Ethan wasn't sure if he understood. "You want me to work for you?" "Exactly," Richard replied. "I'm offering you a position at Jets Enterprises. You'll be working alongside some of the brightest minds in the business. We'll train you, and you'll grow with us." Ethan was stunned. This wasn't just any job offer. It was an opportunity to be part of something huge. But why him? Why would Richard choose a retail worker with no formal business background? Richard seemed to read his mind. "I believe in people, Ethan. It's not just about what you know, it's about who you are. And you've got something special." Ethan felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Could this really be happening? After losing his job over a simple act of kindness, he was now being offered a chance at a new life. But there was still one question that lingered. "Why me?" Ethan asked. "Why not someone else?" Richard's eyes gleamed. "I've been watching you, Ethan. I see potential in you that goes beyond your experience. I think you'll be the perfect fit for Jets Enterprises, and I'm confident you'll prove me right." Ethan accepted the offer, and within days, he began his training at Jets Enterprises. The world he entered was unlike anything he had ever known. The company's headquarters was a sprawling complex filled with intelligent, driven individuals who seemed to work around the clock. Ethan felt like a small fish in a giant pond, but he was determined to prove himself. As the weeks went by, Ethan's confidence grew. He worked on several high-profile projects, collaborating with colleagues who had years of experience in the industry. Richard took a personal interest in his development, guiding him and offering invaluable advice. Ethan quickly realized that the more he learned, the more he liked the world of business. He began to understand the dynamics of strategy, innovation, and decision-making that drove Jet's enterprises forward. But there were still moments of doubt. Ethan often found himself wondering why Richard had singled him out. Why had he been offered this incredible opportunity when he was just an ordinary guy with no business background? Was there a hidden... One afternoon, while working late, Ethan overheard a conversation between Richard and his son, Jacob Klein. The two men were discussing Ethan's progress, but their conversation was far from ordinary. "I'm impressed with how quickly he's adapting," Jacob said. "But do you think he's ready for the next step?" Richard's voice was calm but firm. "Not yet, but soon. He's got potential, and I don't want to rush things. But when the time comes, he'll be ready. We can't afford to lose him." Ethan's heart raced. What were they talking about? What did the next step mean? Weeks later, Ethan was summoned to Richard's office. The moment he stepped inside, he knew something big was about to happen. Richard's demeanor was more serious than usual. "Ethan," Richard began, "I've been watching you closely. You've exceeded all expectations, and I believe it's time to take the next step in your career with us." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What do you mean by the next step?" Richard smiled. "I'm offering you a permanent position with Jet's Enterprises. You'll be part of an exclusive team, one that drives the company's future." Ethan was speechless. This was everything he had ever dreamed of, but it came with a heavy responsibility. "Are you ready for this?" Richard asked, his voice firm but inviting. Ethan took a deep breath. He had come a long way from the parking lot that rainy afternoon. It was time to make a decision. He nodded. "Yes, I'm ready." Richard smiled. "Welcome aboard, Ethan. You've just made the best decision of your life."